Welcome to the Jess Turner Talk Show. I'm the co-host, Miss Laraine, and today we're going to speak with the mother of a child who over 8 years ago revealed he was transgender. As parents, we believe we can handle anything and everything our children may say or do, but many have realized this isn't the case when your child reveals that they're transgender. Transgender essentially means having the body of one gender and the brain or the mind or the spirit of the opposite gender. For those of you feeling lost, confused, or maybe even angry, today I have with me Miss Yesenia Alvarez, founder of Transcend with Love, a for profit organization intended to help other parents and loved ones as they walk through their journey of transition as a parent of a transgender individual. Welcome, Yesenia, to the show.
Hey, Laraine.
I'm glad to have you.
I am glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course. Let's jump right in because there's a lot of questions, and I'm sure that the audience is really going to be tuned into this because so many parents have embarked upon this journey, and some may not even know that this journey is ready to come up. So this is very important for them. So the very first question that I would like to ask: share with us the moment your son revealed he was transgender.
It was a Sunday morning, and I found out through Facebook. So I happened to just be looking on Facebook, and that morning I see he had posted basically stating, what his new name was and that he wanted everybody to call him this. And you can imagine that my reaction was, I think I was in shock. One, because I found out through Facebook. So I had a lot of emotions. One, because of how I found out. Two, not understanding what was going on. And three, really trying to figure out what did I miss? Like how is this happening? And I had no clue. So yeah, that is how it happened. And it was in 2015.
Wow. Okay. You mentioned in one of your questions that being Catholic, how did this affect your belief?
Well, I was born and raised Catholic. Like I went to Catholic school. I chose a Catholic college. I was your typical Catholic. So it was a little bit of a it was a little difficult because unfortunately right now a lot of religions and they have different views, right? And I actually went away from the church for a while. I'm back. I've been able to journey my way back, which I'm very happy for. Um, but it was very difficult because at that moment I felt like I had to choose. Once it once it all pretty much settled down and I kind of started understanding what was going on, felt like I had to choose between my church and my child. And that was a decision I wasn't ready to make and I wasn't willing to make. And so what I did is pretty much left and I started doing my own research.
Hmm.
Um, and at that point, I went through my journey and I'm back and I'm realizing now that we can, or I've realized that we can reconcile the two. We can definitely reconcile our religious beliefs and upbringing to what is going on with our children. I don't believe it's a either or anymore. I believe it's an and together. So it was, I think that was the most difficult journey for me
Okay.
was reconciling those two beliefs.
All right. What are some of the specific challenges you face as a parent since this transition?
Well, like I said, the religion portion was a large part. Politically, also, it was a big part. I My beliefs at the time were are very conservative.
Hmm.
I still have a lot of conservative beliefs, but like I said, the Catholic religion and the political side of it was very much how I was raised, so it was ingrained in me. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. I said for me at the time, I was not sure how to put those together with the love and support that I felt for my child. All
Hmm.
I knew is everything was coming to me as all this information I was getting as to what even transgender meant. I had no idea what
Hmm.
it meant, just trying to get information from all kinds of places. And I think that was the biggest part was I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know who to turn to because I had these specific beliefs and upbringing that I had, and it was completely going against what I was being told about my child. And all I knew was that I loved my child, and that this was not an easy road, and it was not something that was a choice for him. That I knew inside my heart. I The entire journey within that happened in the last 8 years and is still going on is basically putting that together. But I basically had to go and reach out to people that I didn't know to try to get some sort of help and support because I was completely lost. So I was able to find a few groups online, but wasn't anybody specifically that I could talk to that had ever been through anything like this before.
Okay. All right. You had mentioned, just stemming off what you just said about that they don't have a choice. Some parents would disagree with you and say, yes, they do have a choice to, and they need to stay who they were born to be. If they were born a male, they stay a male, and vice, and same thing with a female. So, do you run across some parents who challenge you on that statement that they don't have a choice?
Yes, yes. And I'm really glad you brought this up because one of the main things I want to make sure people understand about what I'm trying to do is I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. Like I'm not here to convince someone politically or religiously. Everybody's journey is their own journey, and everybody is going to come to a conclusion that is going to fit them. My goal is to be that person that when they first find out is to help them through, let's say, that first mile. I always like saying, if at least with me, when I found out, I felt like I got hit by a bus.
Mm,
So I want to be that person that goes up to you as you got hit by a bus, offers you my hand, helps you get up and helps you walk those first steps.
okay.
I know my experience. I can't expect to know everyone else's, and I don't want to. Everyone else's experience is their own. But the emotions are the same, regardless of what your beliefs are, the
Mm-hmm.
emotions are the same. So I don't really talk about politics or religion too much. I'm there more to talk about the emotions, how
Okay.
the parent is feeling. The main purpose is to eventually be able to have a good relationship with their child, because that really, regardless of what it ends up being, that is the most important thing, is for a parent to continue to have that relationship with their child, regardless of the age. They could be under 18, they could be 45. You still want as a parent to have that relationship and that unconditional love for each other. And so that is the purpose of what I'm trying to do.
Okay. How old was your son when he revealed to you that he
He was 17. He was
17?
about to be 17. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you see any signs prior to him coming out? Did you have an idea that something wasn't quite right or?
Yeah, I had an idea something was right. It wasn't right, but I had no idea that this is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
We had gone through a few years before of himself hurting himself,
Mm-hmm.
self-harm, some suicide attempts. And so at the time, he had come out basically as bisexual
Okay.
when he was like 15, and then that turned into him being a lesbian. And all of that, like that, I wasn't surprised. I kind of had an inclination about that from before. So when the suicide attempts continued, I was confused because I thought that we had already kind of dealt with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so the signs were there because he was so unhappy and depressed, but there was no signs in the sense of him acting as a little boy. However, I never had a little boy,
Mm-hmm.
so I really wasn't sure what that looked like. All I knew
Okay.
is that him and my daughter, who is 2 years younger, were completely different. They were completely different from when they were little. Um, but I just assumed that that was just personality. So
Okay. Let's talk about your emotional health. Um, how has your emotional health, has it, was it of the time that you were depressed or what were you feeling when?
um, after the initial shock, I'm the type of person that I go into research mode. And
Okay.
so I went from initial shock to just research. And then once that initial research part ends and the analytical side of me stop, then the emotions hit. The
Mm-hmm.
emotions were, I was terrified. I was terrified. I felt guilty, but I wasn't sure why. I felt shame. Um, I was I was sad. And a lot of it was because I had this fear. I I had a fear for my child, obviously. And this is
Mm-hmm.
nowhere. 8 years ago, it's nowhere like it is right now. So for any parent that is just finding out that their child is transgender right now, I can understand the fear that is taking over because the climate right now is so much more heightened than it was
Yes.
8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I was scared for their future. I was wondering, okay, is he sure? Or what, or back then, is she sure? Like, what is she talking about? Like, how can this be? I've never seen any signs. Like, there was so many questions that I had. And the the problem that I realize now that I went, not the problem, but the way that I handled it, I shouldn't have, because I was so worried about my child. I was so worried about him that I didn't want him to see any part of me struggling, because I didn't want to add to already whatever struggle he was doing, especially after the suicide attempts, and seeing him go through that. So I internalized a lot of my own feelings. I would talk to a couple of really close friends and family, and as much as they tried to support, they didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, I didn't have anybody really close to me that was there for me. And so I internalized everything. And in doing so, yes, I got my anxiety went off the roof, my depression, I started getting depressed. And I basically completely threw myself I avoided my feelings so much that I threw myself into just learning about this, which was really good in a way, but at the same time, not great, because I was neglecting myself.
Mm-hmm.
I became your very angry, resentful, bitter person against everybody, because it was basically me and my child against the world. Um, and I put myself in that position to the point now where I see that it even affected my younger daughter. I was so involved with my son and everything going on that as much as I was still a part of her life, everyday life, I did really, whenever it came to my son, I was extra sensitive. I
Mm-hmm.
was extra protective. And a lot of that came because I wasn't dealing with all of my fears,
Okay.
and accepting the fact that I was ashamed, in the sense of I still didn't know what it meant. Did it mean that I did something wrong? Did it mean that, what did this mean? And so I did have a lot of guilt and shame inside of me. And I wasn't sure why, which made it even harder to process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's mhm.
Thanks for sharing that with us. And I know that you mentioned your son had attempted suicide. How did you find out?
There was two that I knew about for sure, and then I found out later that there had been multiple before that I didn't know about, which
Oh,
made it feel
wow.
even worse.
Yes.
Um, the first one was in May of 2013. It was right him ending freshman year in high school, and it was one of his friends that reached out to me through text and says, please go check on her. She's in the bathroom and she's drinking Windex. So that I ran up there, saw that. I was completely dumbfounded, had
I
no
can only
idea.
imagine.
I didn't even know what to do. The good thing is that we had found recently we had found a therapist that really had connected, because they had been through therapists and nobody could ever really connect with them. Um, and so this therapist, I reached out to her immediately, and she knew of a place in San Antonio called Clarity that was for children that were 17 years and younger.
Okay.
And so she was able to get me in there. So we went there the first time. He was there for about a week, and then had some, follow-up visits. He found a really good psychiatrist there, which we found out that some of his medicines was not working well. Um, So that was the first one. And then I went into hypervigilant mode, make sure that everything was, there was nothing sharp around, making sure that all was taken care of. Pretty much walking on eggshells.
Yes.
It's sad to say it that way, but it's what it was. Like my life became make sure that I say nothing wrong and no one does anything wrong, like over, over the top. Because I was terrified. I was terrified. Um, then in October of that same year, things I thought things were getting a little better, but at the same time I was noticing that they were about that he was starting to re kind of get back into his shell a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I just sensed something and I walked upstairs and he was in his closet and he had found an old pencil sharpener and he was in the middle of slitting his wrist when I walked in to the closet. Um, that that is something that completely changed any perspective that I had ever had as a mother or as a person to actually see it as it was
Yes.
happening, to actually see the look that he had of just basic just defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I went in, I took it away and I flat out asked him, "Do you want to die right now?" And he looked at me and he said, "Yes." Um, so I went into action. This is what I do. I went into action. I called that place again. They got him back in there. He was in there longer. And once I got home is when I finally started crying. Um, it was it was one of the worst moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Worst moments.
Do you think that he's attempted since you, well, let's kind of give it a time frame. Do you think he's attempted any time this year?
No. Do I believe that he still self farms every once in a while? Yes.
Okay.
I've seen it, like scars. Um, I used to get really anxious about it and start questioning him, and I recognized that me doing that only added more anxiety to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I started just backing off and waiting for him to talk to me. Um, I do not believe that he is in a place anymore where he wants to end his life.
Okay.
He's in a very much better place. I
That's
really feel
good.
that self-harm for him is still a coping mechanism. Um, so I mean that's hard as a parent to see that, but at the same time, I'm grateful that he's in a different place than he was years ago.
Okay. Good. Um, you mentioned that you seemed like you were walking on eggshells, and I can only imagine that you don't want to say the wrong thing, you don't want to push too hard, but you're a concerned parent. And any time that you have a child or any loved one that has displayed that they want to die, and have said it to your face, yes, I want to die. I can only imagine what goes off in your head like this. Your world just explodes. Like, oh my God, what can I do? How can I stop it? What could I say, to make them change their mind? So yeah, you do go into that mode of trying to get all the information that you can, you know, tips and tricks and techniques. But
And
wow.
at the same time, trying to process all this information that you're getting. There's so much information out there, and all of
Yes.
it is meant for good, I believe. And I think all of it can work for different people. It's like it's like a therapist. You can go to one therapist and it doesn't work for you. You can go to, 15 more and finally you find one that works for you. There was nothing wrong with those 15 therapists. It's just that
Yes.
that was just not the one that worked for you. And I believe that there's so much information out there that as a parent getting involved or first finding out one that your child wants to die, and two, again, like with the transgender, it's like where do you start? Where do you start? Because not only are you overwhelmed and you're upset, you have all these emotions at the same time. Now you have to analytically start processing
Yes.
all these words that you're reading and are coming at you. And to switch between emotion and analytical, well, that's very different. I mean, that's very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. So it takes a long time to be able to do that. And it takes a lot of work and a lot
Yes,
of
it
just
does.
self-discipline, which I
Yes.
did not have at the time, but I'm still working on.
Did his other siblings know about his attempts?
My so at the time, my son, so when he attempted suicide the second time, his dad and his father and I are divorced. His father lived in San Antonio. We decided that it'd be a good idea for him to move in with him and start a
Mhm.
different school. San Antonio is a little more, was a little more open. I lived in a smaller town, very conservative. And so I also wanted him to have a different environment because I was starting to recognize that maybe it was my home environment that wasn't helping him. And that as a parent is very difficult to do,
Yes.
to realize that the environment that you're giving your child might not be the one where he can flourish, and actually saying, okay, here, other parent, you can take over for a while was extremely difficult. But it was the best thing that I actually could have ever done for him. So he ended up living with his dad. And so my daughter was living with me. So when the second suicide attempt happened, she was aware of both of them because she was there at the house.
Okay.
Um, when he came out as transgender, he was already living at his father's house and she was with me. So she was part of all of that.
Okay. All right. How soon after your son's announcement did you involve outside friends and family?
Well, immediately I called his father because that's who
Okay.
he lived with. And I'm like, did you see this? And he hadn't. And I was curious if he had said anything to him because they're close. And he was just as surprised as I was. So I reached out to his father first, and then I reached out to him. Um, Obviously at that time I was married also. And so my husband at the time was there with me, trying to figure out what was going on. But I reached out and then I reached out to my son, and I wanted the very first thing for my son to hear was that I loved him and that nothing changed. I did say, I wish you would have told me. And he told me that he didn't know how to bring it up. He
Right.
didn't know how to say it. So he thought that this was the best way to do it. Since then, he has regretted posting it on Facebook and he has deleted it because he has regretted it since then. I haven't really gone into why, but so I reached out to them first. After that, it took a few days for me to sit there and process,
Mm-hmm.
and then I reached out to a couple of like friends and really close friends, and a really close friend of mine and my sister is
Okay.
who I reached out to.
Have they been supportive of his transition?
Yes, I've been very fortunate. He has been very fortunate that
Mhm.
the close family and friends that we do have been very supportive. They might not agree, some of them don't, but it's never been an issue of not respecting his decision. It's just been that they know when to say something and when not to. And I respect that. There was a time where I didn't, and I was
Yes.
very hurt that people didn't want, follow what I said. Um, but I realized that like I said, everybody's on their own journey.
Yes.
And and as long as they love and support the decision in whatever way they can, then that is what matters. And I believe that that's why it's so easy for me to say that I can talk to both sides because I have been on both sides.
Okay. Well, we've actually run out of time, and this
Oh,
conversation is like really, really good, and I'm excited that we're going to do a part two. Excuse me. But I invite you to join us as we continue this conversation next time. And as our producer, Jess Turner, always says, don't ponder it in your heart. Let's talk about it on the next Jess Turner Talk Show. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.
thank you.